Welcome to the Globetrottin ADs. This podcast is for you, athletic directors, activity coordinators, coaches, and program associates based in international schools around the world. The Globetrottin ADs is proudly hosted by Nick DeForest from the American International School Vienna and Matt Fleming from the American International School of Budapest. Here they are now, Nick and Matt and the Globetrottin ADs.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Globetrottin ADs. Today, we're lucky to have a best-selling author with us, a #1 New York Times best-selling author. We have Nathan Whitaker with us. Nathan's a lawyer, has a professional background as well, working in sports with the NFL, two teams, the Jaguars of Jacksonville and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a speaker and a writer, and he specializes in leadership, which is something that's always of interest for us as athletic directors in the international school world. So we're happy to have Nathan with us. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership and his background and how it helps us as ADs. So before getting to that, though, I'm going to throw it over to my main man, Nick, in Vienna. How you doing, Nick? Welcome back. Happy New Year. It's our first podcast of the new year.
Yeah, and we're starting with a bang. Very thankful, Nathan, to have you with us. We enjoyed you at the summer conference. Feels like eons ago, and a lot of things in between happening. And a good reason to have you on, not just because of your work in the U.S. and all those things that Matt said, but also you have a direct link to international schools now that we'll talk more about later. But before that, welcome and give us a bit more of a background. Let us get to know you a bit.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate you all having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it was great to be a part of your summer conference, which, watching you guys from a distance, and we've talked about this a little bit, but watching the way you guys have not only been intentional with how you've tried to provide resources and tools for others, but then the way you guys pivoted when everything shut down and you threw together, for me, it looked like you threw it together, but you had thousands of people around the world on your summer conference. So it was awesome to be a part of that. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm a Florida guy. Grew up in Florida here in the southeastern US and have spent much of my life there. I went off to Duke University, played football and baseball, and then went to Harvard Law School. So I kept working my way north. And then after finishing at Harvard, came back to Florida. And I've spent most of my professional career in Florida, a couple of years in North Carolina. But as Matt said, after practicing law for a little bit, I was able to break in with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And with the Jaguars of the NFL, they're with American football. I did salary cap work, contract negotiations, did the contracts for all our travel providers, so hotels, airlines, all that, and then spent 3 years with the Tampa Bay Bucs. And so I spent my first year there, for anybody who pays attention, my first year, or who follows football, that is. My first year was with Tony Dungy, and he got fired after my first year. And then I spent 2 years with John Gruden, and we won a Super Bowl and had some good things happen. And in the meantime, Tony had gone off with the Indianapolis Colts. So as things unfolded, I was then fired after 2 years with Coach Gruden. They cleaned us out and made changes in the front office. And Tony went on to win a Super Bowl. And so Tony and I reconnected. And as I was looking for what was next in my career, wrote a book with Tony. And so I've now been writing books for the last 14 years. And as Matt said, a couple of those were in the leadership, team building area. And so that's been a lot of fun for me to not only do research in those areas, but also look at some of the coaches I worked for and played for, and been able to go in and speak to companies and schools and the like on some of these topics. So I don't know if that's too much or what you had in mind, but that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That is you. So that's great. That's what we want to know. That's what everyone who doesn't know you as well as we do wants to know. So that's great. Well, you started as an athlete and then went into corporate world, but in athletics. But what do you think? You mentioned you played football and baseball, so two-sport athlete at a Division I school. What was your biggest moment as an athlete? What was something cool that happened to you way back?
So, had some fun experiences in college. We were terrible when I got to Duke in baseball. And we only won 10 games that year, but I had one of the game winning. So I figured, it's 10% of our to have 1 out of 10 wins. So that was kind of a highlight as a freshman. And then my football career was great. I played under Steve Spurrier. So my actual career wasn't all that great. Unfortunately, there's not video with this podcast, but if there was, you'd be able to see that I'm tall and thin and don't look like a football player. I was a kicker. And so I played a little bit, but was on some really good teams and around some really good folks. And so just had some really fun experiences with that. And now being back in Gainesville, which is where Coach Spurrier was from, he now lives here. So I run into him at the grocery store all the time. So it's kind of fun to just kind of be back around and do all that. There were a couple of things, and I don't know if this was part of your question, but a couple of things that kind of bled. You mentioned going from athletics into the corporate world. And, one of the things was I really always wanted to have more success on the field personally. I mean, again, I really was probably didn't have the physical skills to be a Division I athlete, but I was really a try-hard guy. And really would do whatever coaches wanted and put in extra work. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that really, a couple of those themes then that really have carried over for me is one is to some extent, the work ethic, the putting in time when, writing books is you're sitting here alone, you're at your desk, there's nobody to ask how the progress is going until the deadline hits. And so you got to do that. The other thing that I think what helped was not having a ton of success and kind of at times thinking, oh my gosh, I worked all this for, and after a while you realize that, sometimes success can best be measured in small incremental ways, that I'm actually getting better today than I was yesterday. And so maybe there's not a lot of glory along the way, or at least there wasn't for me. But you realize, what, I'm plugging along and I'm making progress and I'm better today than I was yesterday.
And you took those exact things into, let's say, your corporate career.
I tried, and it's funny, you don't necessarily think of it in those terms. And there are times when, you get fired by the Bucs or you hit your head against some other issue at work or whatever it is, and you're kind of stuck in the middle of it. And you don't look back and say, oh, this is perfect. This ties into the incremental progress of 20 years ago when things weren't working out that great. But sometimes it helps you to step back and to get some perspective and to say, you know what, this seems really awful today, but I've actually kind of been here before in similar ways.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how it's going to end, but I know that if I continue to push forward, that this is not going to feel tomorrow or the day after like it feels today.
Yeah, you mentioned that bit about, the unfortunate bit about getting fired from the Bucs. And I was actually reading your blog just a little bit ago about how I guess you're near the anniversary of when that happened and how the coach made you a free agent, so to speak,
right.
Like the GM, right? And so,
yeah.
When you go through that process, what's kind of a timeline with that? Where it's always going to be upsetting at first, but when you go through that phase of when it happens, and then you kind of digest it, I guess, and what kind of skills do you take from, I don't know, your background in sports or working with others in leadership to kind of, like you said, we pivoted. How did you pivot to turn that negative into a positive, or how long did it take?
Yeah. And, it's funny. It kind of can, I think there's no particular formula or timeline for how you deal with, people talk about the stages of grief and in some ways being fired, losing a job can probably feel a lot like that in some ways as far as how people deal with it and process it. For me, I had been for a while trying to decide what was the best path. And it did feel like maybe I was reaching the end of the line with the Buccaneers. I had a chance to go to the Bears the year before, and the Buccaneers had blocked me because I was under contract. And they said they had huge plans for me, and they wouldn't let me go. And so then the way the next year unfolded, I realized there were no plans and that this was, anyway, it just was not working out. And so there was almost a sense of relief when he made me a free agent. And then when I asked for clarification, he said, yeah, I'm firing you. Don't come in here anymore. And so there was almost a sense of relief. In fact, I said, do you mind if I come back tomorrow and pack up my office? Because I'd like to get home and break the news to my wife. And he felt so badly for me. And meanwhile, I'm on the phone with my wife going, let's go to dinner. Let's celebrate. I'm out. And I still had some time left on my contract. I had like 3 months left on my contract, so I was going to be paid. And so, but then processing it over time, then I decided to try to write a book, and that wasn't going so well. And so now I'm unemployed and trying to follow this dream of writing a book about Tony Dungy, and Tony didn't really want a book written about him. And so that wasn't working out. That actually ended up taking 3 years. So there were ebbs and flows. There were times when I thought, okay, this is really the path I'm supposed to be on. And thank goodness that happened to close that door. And now I'm in the right spot. And then other days where I thought, what have I done? I've got a degree from Harvard, and I've got, all these experiences, and I'm not able to make ends meet right now. And maybe I need to kind of back up and go a different path. And so there was not a clear linear, hey, I processed it over these few weeks and then I really found my way through. It was really kind of a long up and down journey at times. And there are even times now, being a creative, where projects seem to come in one after another and you think, man, I have really got this mastered. And then things slow down or whatever it may be, or something seems particularly challenging and you're thinking, what am I doing? Why am I not just working 9 to 5 for some company down the street where everything's a little clearer? So I don't know if that's a great answer, Matt, but I think that's true in a lot of life, right? I've spoken to a bunch of kids. I've talked to, and the phrase, it's darkest before the dawn, and one of the things that I've taken away from that and told them is that in life, you can't always see when dawn is going to break. So there's not that sense of, okay, this seems awful now, but if I just give it another 3 weeks or a month, I'll be through this. Right. That there are times when you have to push on in faith and say, you know what, if I keep putting one foot in front of the other, it's not always going to be like this. Yeah. And that's been a big part of my journey, is realizing that I just need to keep pushing ahead and have faith that things will turn.
Yeah. Well, it's thanks for sharing that, because it's so true. I think it parallels a lot of what we're trying to tell kids in sports, right? It's like these things happen, or they have setbacks, or they might happen in their academic career or their social life, and there's way they can get through it, but it's a process. It's not just going to happen right away. So thanks for sharing that little story. That's cool. Yeah, because I wanted to know the answer because I saw it in your blog today. You have a picture of a bouquet a friend sent you of some cookies about getting fired.
Right.
It's kind of cute.
I had just been fired, and 2 days later, somebody rings the doorbell, and I've got a cookie delivery, and the cookies are shaped like a fireplace, a fire truck.
Well done, cookie bouquet. I've never seen a lot of detail.
Yeah, it was a lot of detail, and I didn't get it, and so I called him and I said, I don't get what you're doing, and he said, fired. Everything has to do with fire. And
yeah, so if you guys look on Nathan's website, you got a picture of it there. It's from today, and it's there's a football on fire, there's a fire truck, a fireplace, a fire hydrant, and look, a blazer. Congrats! Very nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's again part of that perspective, right? What seems awful in the moment, especially, you look back and you realize, if I hadn't gotten fired, I don't know if I'd be writing books today. So,
Wow. Well, in terms of thanks for that. Like in terms of books, what's been your most enjoyable book to write, or is there any books that you look back and thought, man, that one came off really good, and or one you're most proud of?
Yeah, I think the short answer, the easy answer, is that all of them are unbelievably brilliant, Matt. And so it's hard to pick. My first book, Quiet Strength, is Tony Dungy's story. And that's the one that, it's sold 3 million copies, and it hit number 1 on the New York Times list. And so that had a lot, received a lot of accolades, hit platinum status or whatever it was for books. And so that was great from an outside standpoint. But also the little bit I shared with you just now of my journey makes that really meaningful, because that was the 3 years of being unemployed when I really had this dream that Tony's book could help people and could be a resource for people. And Tony said, "You're crazy. I don't think I don't think anybody needs to read about me. So there's a part of me that's really tied up personally in Quiet Strength. The other book that I really like, the other kind of two I would kind of mention. One is called Soul of a Team that came out recently, and then also Snap Decision. And the two things that those have in common is that they're both fiction, and I really enjoy fiction. I really enjoyed writing those. So Soul of a Team is actually a teamwork book with Tony, but because we had told so many stories from his NFL days, we fictionalized a sports team and then created all these awful experiences where people are not able to work together and the like, and borrowed some from real NFL stories, but fictionalized.
Just change names to protect you.
We did, totally. We had things come up in our books where Tony would say, "Oh my gosh, but we can't say that because I don't want to embarrass anybody." So we threw all those into this book.
Nice.
And so I really enjoyed doing the fiction, both those. The other one, Snap Decision, that I mentioned, is actually for designed for middle and high schoolers. That's a sports-related book, fiction book that I wrote. But those two, I really enjoyed doing having the creative license to kind of just dream up stuff and put it in.
So I'm going to have to reread Soul of a Team. Not just the notes I made of it, but reread it. And then maybe next time we talk, I'll pick out a story and see if you want to share who it really, off air, of course, but
off the air, right.
Who it really is.
Right. I can't remember if any of them were about your Buffalo Bills. I don't think there were, but we can figure that out.
We want to talk about international school and coaches and that. But first I want to ask, can you share about any upcoming books? Do you have any in the hopper that you're working on that you can share, or I can cut this out if the answer is no?
I really don't have anything on the front burner. I'm actually trying to work on a fiction project right now. Okay. So there's not really anything that's imminent, unfortunately. I would love to be able to plug something.
Sure.
Was fiction something you had thought about doing for a while, or just something that came up?
So it's something I've always enjoyed, and I was an English major, and I've always enjoyed reading fiction. I don't know that I really had any design on it because I didn't think I was talented enough to be a writer. I mean, I went to law school, I did other stuff, and then felt called to write Tony's book, and it went so well that I thought, maybe I can actually do this stuff. And so then it started to progress over the last few years of something I'd like to branch out into.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about coaches. So one person you met through, let's say, Globetrottin ADs was Chris Mott, the AD now in Bangkok, who anyone who listens, I think, knows. It's been on enough with us. And you guys put together, or you did, I want to know the origin of it, a professional development series for his coaches. How did that come to be, and what is it? Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, you and I think first connected, and it might have been over Soul of a Team via Twitter. And then through those exchanges, we had all of a sudden doing your summer conference. And then Chris and I started talking. And Chris is, like the rest of you, very interested in professional development, trying to give his coaches tools to help them with their coaching, with their lives, with whatever. And so as we spoke over time, just started brainstorming over ways that we could do things and what we could communicate. And so during, often I go in and give workshops to companies or do things. And then during COVID and the pandemic, Chris started talking about, well, what if you were a repeat presenter, and what if we did more topics? And so we brainstormed and came up with 8 topics. And so I was on every morning at 5:30 in the morning, my time, 5:30 in the afternoon, his time. And for 8 weeks, we did a professional development series. And it was kind of a back and forth of things I'd spoken about, talking about leadership, talking about team building, other things, resilience I'd given talks on. And then Chris also saying, hey, can you talk about how tough it is at times to get kids motivated and the like, and so, or any of us motivated. So we put together 8 weeks and had a variety of topics. And so we went through them each time, and it was a lot of fun. And it was fun to have the repeat folks where I would see not only Chris's staff and coaches and administrators and teachers from his school, but then there was somebody else who got on from Jakarta and some other spots. And to me, those all feel like they're really close together, but apparently they're not. So anyway, it was a fun thing that we did. And then I've been catching up on my sleep ever since.
Yeah. To be on, ready to go at 5:30 is an ask.
Right, especially for a writer. I mean, I became a writer so that I wouldn't have to be on every morning at 5:30.
Well, one thing that when Chris was sharing the idea with me a while ago, what I really liked is it's continuous, right? It's not just a one and done. No matter how great a speaker is and how much you can get out of one one session or one book, something continuous. It just is so much more meaningful. What kind of feedback did you get? Did they like that same aspect, or?
They did. So I think, and again, they thought I was brilliant and amazing. And yeah, that was my feedback. No, one of the things that I really enjoyed of that, because I do love going in and speaking, and I love feeling like, you've totally got an audience in your hand, and then it ends and you speak to everybody afterwards for a few minutes, and then you vanish and go to the next city. Right. And I always think, well, great. Well, what happens with those folks after you're gone? And so one of the things with that I did with Chris is we tried to develop at least some baseline materials where, the goal is, and I don't know, again, this has been a crazy year with virtual school and then in person and whatever, but the goal would be that they could internally continue to talk about some of those things. And it would give at least points where Chris can talk back through with his coaches, and they can talk about, hey, we talked about such and such. How's that going in? And I told them I give everybody my email, my phone number. And I've had a number of people email me after, just things are related, things are different that we didn't talk about, and ask other questions. And so that's been great as far as being able to do just week after week. And in fact, we would do each segment was 5:30 to 6 or 6:10 where I would speak. And then they could ask questions. And sometimes it would be questions on what I'd just spoken of, but other times there would be questions on what I'd talked about the week before. It was like they had a chance to digest it, and they'd say, you said, right. And of course then I'm scrambling because I'm like, wait, it's 6 a.m. What did I talk about last week? But it was good, I think, to have them have an opportunity to let things sit and then be able to follow up either with Chris or others on staff or me then. So for me, it worked really well.
Was this your first foray into working with an international type of crowd?
It was, other than your conference before that. And, one of the things that I've shared a little bit with you guys is how fascinating I find this whole international school situation to be. And that you guys are this loosely affiliated. I mean, you've got so much in common, but then you're also flung around the globe in completely different cultures and settings, and with totally, the students at the school down the street from me in Gainesville are very different than the kids just down the street, but still in Gainesville. I can only imagine what you guys are dealing with as far as all the differences, but you guys have so much in common and lean on each other in so many ways. So it was really interesting for me to sit there and think, I'm talking to a group in Thailand, and Jakarta, and from Indonesia to Thailand to wherever else was on the call, and so that was fun. And to hear some of the different things come up that they were dealing with was eye-opening for me. At the same time, I think a lot of what we deal with in leadership, in building teams, and trying to relate to each other as individuals and what might motivate us and draw us out, there are an awful lot of similarities.
Yeah, that's one thing I've felt over the years. I'm originally from Ohio. I've worked in public schools. I worked in private schools up there, and I've worked in rural settings. I worked in the suburban setting. I've been an international educator for the last 20 years. And the truth is, the core is kids are kids, of course, and there's always opportunities to reach out to kids and help them and grow and nurture them and become better kids. So being in the international setting is a little more unique, I suppose. It's a different setup, of course, and something we've really embraced and grown to love over the years. And of course, us as Nick and I bringing up our kids and raising our families in this environment. But it is universal. These things we're talking about are totally universal. And that's what's great to be able to, for us to be able to connect with you in Florida and Nick's in Vienna. And we're talking about the same things, just trying to help people get better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What I really, you touched on it about Chris being able to go back and follow up with his coaches on this. And that's one thing I see a lot of schools missing is this common language about a topic like this, or about leadership, about athletics, because everyone is so international. They've had so many different experiences. They're not just all from Florida, for example. They've lived other places. They've seen other things, worked under different athletic directors. And a program like this, or if a school has one program, let's say, that all coaches buy into, then they have this common language where they all experience that together, and they can all relate and talk about it and discuss it, right? Where you're all on the same page, I think, which is really nice. So I hope, we should follow back up with Chris. How well was the conversation after, and did that bring his staff closer together? Because I think it has to, right? A catalyst to have these conversations, in the hallway or on the playing field, wherever. Yeah.
Right. No, definitely. And Chris and I have talked about trying to figure out what was next, whether it would be 8 new topics or hitting those again, or whatever it might be. But yeah, one of the things I try to do is when I go into, if I go in and speak to a college team or whatever, I don't necessarily want to give a message that overrides what they're trying to do internally. I mean, they've got a particular culture, they've got something they're trying to do. So I'll talk to them ahead of time and try to understand, okay, what are some of the challenges you've got? What are some of the things that work? But then give them a few touch points, as you mentioned, that common language where they can say, remember when Nathan came in and he spoke about X, Y, and Z? Here's how that helps us trying to do what we're trying to do here at whatever my school might be. Right. And so sometimes it just helps give them another tool in the toolbox where they have that common language, or they have those common concepts, or, there's some where I give the 4 elements of the soul of a team. And I know people will walk away and go, you know what, this one really resonated with me. And that's fine. They don't have to use anything with the other 3, but it may be that one of them really ties into what they're trying to do. And if that gives them anything to work with, then great.
Right.
Nathan, have you worked with other parts of schools or other school groups, for example, like boards or leadership teams outside of just working with athletic departments?
So I have worked with a couple of boards, and then I've also done more things with. I've been in actual classrooms at times, okay. And I've also done things on the university level, going into classrooms and talking with them. But I have not done as much with leadership teams. I would love to do that and be a part of. I think there would be great value in kind of as folks plan out the year or talk about some of their goals and the things they'd like to do. I think some of these things that Chris and I talked about and some of those lessons might actually be useful for somebody to incorporate. But I have talked to a couple of boards and done presentations on things they might think about as they set direction for the school.
So with that, you had a positive experience with the international school people, and you like it so far. So are you willing to branch out and go to other international schools and work with them too?
I did. I loved it. And, I've talked with Nick about this a bit. I just find it to be so unique and interesting what you guys are doing. And totally, I think it's a very interesting community, and would love to have a chance to share in a variety of places. Great. And certainly Zoom allows us to do that in a lot of, whatever the online tools are, right. allow us to do that in various ways.
Well, hopefully that'll be a thing of the past before too long, and you can come out here in person one day. We'll see.
Perfect.
That's also in the works, though. I think that's in the works with Chris for next year.
Yes. Look like, knock on wood, and looks like hopefully going to Thailand in the fall for a conference.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great when we could say, remember we used to do Zoom calls? Right. Wouldn't it be great when we arrived at that point down there in the future, somewhere in the future? Zoom. Yeah, we used to do Zoom. We'd be like VCRs back, hopefully. We talk about VHS tapes someday.
That'd be great.
Or dial phones. Where are you?
Yeah, please.
Go on and on. Go on. but Matt, you hit on it, and Nathan, you would be open to doing something like this with other schools. The 8 sessions that you did, they touch on a lot of different things, right? It's not just leadership. I'll list them below in the program notes, but resilience, talking to ourselves, motivation, mindset, all different things. And it's definitely not a plug from you. You didn't want to be on here to sell this program. I think it's, I know Chris and his staff got a lot out of it, and really worthwhile. And so we definitely wanted you to be on to be able to share for international schools out there to know that there's lots of great resources out there if they have the time, I think, right?
Yeah. No, that's totally right. And again, to just the mini plug is that I do love the fact that Chris and whomever, can tailor it to, hey, here's what makes sense for us. 2 months would be good. Or somebody else might say, you know what, I'd love to do just these 4. Mm-hmm. Or, Chris and I talked about, should the next one be to students? We did it to the leaders. Chris is like, should I have my athletes on? And you can talk about how we talk to ourselves. It's one thing to talk to our coaches about, but is it something, it's something I'm learning at the age of 50, that I'm not always the nicest person inside my own head.
Yeah.
And maybe, and I'm trying to apply some of those lessons of how I speak to myself. So anyway, that's part of the beauty is you guys know your culture, your clients better, your students. And so we can tailor it however need be.
And we'll put the links down, but I mean, the best way to go to your website, I think there's a contact tab there, and to drop you in a line, right?
Absolutely. I'd love to be in touch, and it's all there online.
Coach Evaluator is the premier coach evaluation software for schools and athletic organizations and preferred coach evaluation solution of the NIAAA and the Positive Coaching Alliance. The system is completely customizable with an always growing evaluation template library for athletic directors to reference. There are not only evaluations for ADs to use, but also self-evaluations and parent-player evaluations of coaches. Learn more about digitizing and simplifying your coach evaluation process by visiting www.coachevaluator.com. Mention Globetrottin ADs to receive a $200 discount on the yearly rate.
Kukri are a global multi-sport clothing brand specializing in providing the world's most prestigious schools with bespoke-made and designed team uniforms for students of all standards and abilities. If you are frustrated by inconsistent colors, branding, costs, and sizing across your school's uniforms, then it's time to discuss an offering where every sport is available from softball to soccer for male and female athletes at rates to suit your budget. To find out how Kukri could elevate the apparel of your student athletes to a professional level, email the team at contact@kukrisports.com. A dedicated sales manager will offer you a quote today. Mention this ad and receive a special offer on your coach or PE staff order. So you said you're in Florida, and Florida is an exotic place for some of our listeners, right? You mentioned how, Thailand and Jakarta and those places are far away. But if anyone from around there gets a chance to go to Florida, what do they have to do? What's tops on the list? It's a big state. I know it's a big state, but
yeah, or maybe like where you are. You're in Sarasota?
I'm in Gainesville.
Gainesville,
up in the northern part of the state,
mm-hmm.
and the University of Florida is here in my town, and its mascot is the Gators, and so people are stunned. I've had people stunned when they come and I'll say, do you want to see Gators? And they're like, oh yeah, where do we have to go? And I'm like, well, let's just drive to the closest lake and we'll look. And they're like, wait, they're out in the wild, and they are. They're just here all over. So for some, that's an exotic part of Florida, is that we've just got gators and the like around. We're only 2 hours from Disney World, which is one of my family's favorite things to do, with, of course, beaches, and we've got rocket launches all the time 2 hours away here in Florida. That's where most of the U.S. rockets go up out of. So we've got a fair number of things, plus some warm weather and beaches and the like. So Disney World and the alligators are kind of I don't know if that's a selling point or not.
No, it is. It is for me, but
yeah, you can't go wrong with Florida in general. So
right.
It's a good place to be. All right, Nathan. Well, thanks very much for taking the time to join us today and share your thoughts and your past and how you worked with international schools now. So we look forward to hearing more about that down the road, and hopefully maybe we can bring you over here to Europe at some point and work with our crews over here and see what develops. So thanks again for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate all that you guys are doing.
Until next week, this has been another episode of the Globetrottin ADs.